My name is Kate Whitfield, and I'm a principal with Alta Planning and Design. I'm a professional engineer and urban planner based in Ottawa. This video was created to help people looking for jobs in Canada to connect with CITE members who are working in the field of transportation, engineering, and planning. Without conferences and other chances to meet in person, it's important to create these opportunities to help people network in these times. We've invited people who are currently employed in the public and private sectors to come together for these informal chats. I also invited 3 job seekers to share something of interest to them. Hopefully, what comes out of these short talks is a sense of what transportation jobs are like in Canada, and for those looking for work, a better sense of what might interest them. And then a bonus element of hearing about interesting topics in transportation in Canada. And then some networking intel, some sort of job search tips. My hope is that some of the information shared here could be used by someone looking for work to better connect through LinkedIn or otherwise. Maybe something is said here that could open a door to a job. For more information on the people featured in this video, check out the YouTube page. Our hope is that new videos are released periodically over the next sort of few weeks and months. The CITE website has more information on how to get involved. So let's get going and see what the participants in today's episode have to share. I would like to welcome everyone to the 5th episode of CITE Career Connects. This time we're going to start from the West Coast to the East Coast for quick introductions, as we have a number of provinces covered. So please tell us your name and where you're located, and Carrie, we'll start with you.
Excellent. Well, it's morning here in Port Moody, British Columbia. I'm Carrie Fellows, a 30-year transportation planning professional.
Shoben, I think you're next.
Hi guys, my name is Sai Shoben. I'm from University of Alberta. Right now I am in Alberta.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, my name is Mohebullah Afzali. I'm a recent graduate from a civil engineering program at the University of Missouri. I live in London, Ontario.
Hi everybody, my name is Matthew Sweet. I work for the city of Mississauga, and I'm coming to you today from Hamilton, Ontario.
Hi everyone, my name is Anita, Anichebe. I reside in Fredericton, New Brunswick. I'm a civil engineering graduate from the University of New Brunswick.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Florence. I'm a transportation engineer with the Harborside Engineering Group in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
Awesome. So yes, that is our best spread, and I'm always trying to cover more provinces. So that's pretty wonderful. So next, I'll introduce each speaker with a little more detail as we go back and forth between people looking for work and those with jobs currently in transportation planning in Canada that are also CITE members. So a quick 2 minutes, and Carrie, we're going to you first, but first we're going to try an introduction. Carrie is the engineering group manager at Creative Transportation Solutions. So she's based in Port Moody, British Columbia. I think there's some Ontario roots there potentially, having gone to University of Waterloo. Carrie is an accomplished professional engineer with experience in long-range planning through design and implementation. So another example of networking is Carrie and I have never met. So this event brings us together. So I'm grateful for that, Carrie, and I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Kate. And although we've never met, I certainly know lots about you from reading posts on LinkedIn and just following your career path virtually. So great to see you. And thanks for setting this up and for the opportunity. So I chose a project that I worked on when employed by the City of Calgary in Alberta. And I was hired at the City of Calgary to work on area structure plans. Other jurisdictions will call them area plans for greenfield sites that have been newly set up by the city as a collaborative project between landowners who formed groups who contributed to the projects, the planning department of the City of Calgary who led the projects, other technical departments, a series of agency stakeholders like the province, and other external stakeholders that had an interest in the greenfield developments we were planning. So the particular one, the Providence Area Structure Plan, was outside of the now under construction at the time to be completed Southwest Ring Road. So it was a large area, about 2,000 acres. We were planning to accommodate about 3,200 people, 11,000 jobs. This would all be connected to the rest of Calgary on the other side of the ring road by 3 interchanges. So some interesting technical challenges in terms of the capacity to get in and out of the area. There was a vision for a transitway serving the area for rapid transit service, and an interest in livable streets for the whole area. So lots of technical challenges from a transportation planning, traffic engineering perspective, but really the exercise was in a 1-year period to collaborate and to work with the landowners who were at the table and were in fact funding the staff time, and externals, landowners that were currently in the area that had smaller holdings that weren't developers. And then adjacent jurisdictions. So there was the Tsuut'ina First Nations that formed a boundary, obviously the province, and we were also adjacent to the boundaries of what's now Foothills County. My experience in the exercise was there's the technical stuff that's very important. It's what we do, it's what we're trained for, but really listening and hearing the issues and considerations of all of the stakeholders, and then applying what you're hearing in some problem solving that's outside of the technical realm, is really looking at the bigger picture. That was the only way that we were going to get to solutions within the time frame. So really fabulous experience, and really emphasize that the engineering we do is complicated technically. It's for people. You have to hear what the people want and deliver on what people need.
That's great, Carrie, and thank you for starting off that way and sort of setting us up for today. So Moheb, I'll go to you next. So Moheb is a Master of Civil Engineering graduate from the University of Missouri. During this talk, we'll hear the work, hopefully hear the work you did as a graduate research assistant while at the university in the US. But as you said, you're now based in London, Ontario, so it's sort of exciting to see where your career takes you. Moheb is also a Fulbright scholar, right? And let's see if we can sort of use this episode to help you connect. When I first met you, I looked at your resume, with specific reference to pedestrian safety research and geometric design, I thought, like, this is why we need these kind of events. We need to help you connect with people in the industry, and with the lack of in-person, right? This is some of the options that are out there. So I look forward to hearing from you. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for providing this opportunity to connect with professionals across Canada. So I'm going to discuss about one of the projects I've done during my master's studies as a graduate research assistant. This project was about pedestrian safety and active transportation modeling. So the city of St. Louis in Missouri had a significant number of pedestrian vehicle collisions every year. According to some statistics, 7,153 pedestrian vehicle collisions occurred in Missouri between 2013 to 2017. And out of this number, 1,394 collisions occurred in the city of St. Louis, which is a very significant number. This number accounts around 20% of the statewide collision numbers. So in my research, I actually employed a very comprehensive data collection effort to link the neighborhood environment using ArcGIS package, GIS Pro, and automation techniques using Python with the police data and police reports. So I actually collected several data of land use, including school, parks, hospital, bus and transit stops, network connectivity, household income, population density, and so forth. And I modeled binary mixed logit models. And this model actually suggested that there were significant variables that increase the odds of severe collisions in St. Louis. So some of these variables are evening off peak time, network connectivity, speed and movement, morning peak time, elderly and old pedestrians, male drivers, and AADT. So After this, I started to investigate and research about the current practice in the city of St. Louis, whatever practice that has been implemented by Missouri Department of Transportation, City of St. Louis, or any other entities. So some good practices actually perform in this city, including public awareness and education, enhancing and upgrading traffic signals and signages, as well as a small number of traffic calming efforts. But there were limitations in their practice. For example, they didn't address the behavioral factors of pedestrian vehicle collisions, including speed and movement and male drivers, as well as for their street lighting and illumination. They actually used it in parks and city roads, whereas my study suggests that mid-block crossing were the most severe locations. So according to my findings and the current practice in St. Louis, I proposed several countermeasures and mitigation strategies, including but not limited to exclusive traffic signaling, automatic and smart pedestrian detection technology, pavement marking, high visibility crosswalk, and street illumination, speed humps, refuge islands, and so forth. So this study actually was my first pedestrian safety and active transportation research. And I actually understood the importance of saving human lives and actually addressing pedestrian safety issues across this community and society.
Well, thank you for that. And we all know pedestrian safety is such a huge topic in Canada, and that's kind of a good segue, Matthew, to you, who's next, and who has to talk about that a lot in your community. So Matthew is a manager of active transportation at the City of Mississauga. I want to actually bring up Matthew's connection to Mohawk College because the program does so much for professionals in our field. So Matthew has an advanced diploma in transportation engineering technology from Mohawk, and now is a part-time professor teaching topics of active transportation. I hope that I have that right. And people from, particularly Sean Nix from Mohawk College, does so much to advertise jobs and help people reach out. So I just wanted to make that little side plug. So back to the City of Mississauga itself is a busy place in terms of new initiatives related to transportation. And we know there's lots of job posting there recently. So Matthew, hopefully in this conversation, you can help us about the age-old question of getting a resume noticed, as I'm sure you've read a number recently. So with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Kate. Unfortunately, I am no longer teaching at Mohawk, although I did for a while there. And yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, and the program at Mohawk is really unique. And you know, I'm a proud graduate, and I'm happy to talk up the benefits of that program anytime anybody asks me. So I'm glad that you made that connection. And yeah, I definitely still rely on Sean to get the word out about any job postings that I might have too. So he's definitely a huge resource. So yeah, my role at Mississauga is manager for active transportation. So you know, we lean pretty heavily on the cycling side. Pedestrian safety and operations still mostly resides with our traffic operations folks, although we're slowly working to get more of a hand in that. The project that I wanted to highlight was a recent project that is actually still ongoing, which has kind of been the city's first attempt to really build physically separated cycling infrastructure. At least that was the mandate at the time, and now it's kind of dragged out long enough that we may actually see some other projects come online first that meet that mandate. But nonetheless, I think there were a lot of really great lessons that came out of the process that we went through for this project. So the road is called the College Way. It actually leads right into University of Toronto Mississauga campus on the one end, and that was our study scope area, was starting at that end and moving across to the west in the city, about 3.5 kilometers. And when we originally conceived of the project, we really looked at the road and started quite simply just a basic scan of the traffic volumes and said, well, based on these traffic volumes, we can do a road diet on this road, no problem. And that will be a very simple and cost-effective way to achieve physically separated cycling infrastructure, which I think is kind of the standard now that we're all trying to work towards. is physically separated cycling. But it became an object lesson in the politics of infrastructure, and also the complexity of infrastructure. So, you know, at a political level, we encountered a lot of resistance to this concept. And by the time we were able to present something to the public for the first time, a lot of the details that we presented to the public were different from what we originally envisioned. We had to add a lot more alternatives. We had to look at taking it off of the road and doing raised cycling instead, so cycle tracks instead of an on-road bicycle lane. And that then led to a lot more complexity in terms of the design, because now we were looking at needing to relocate lots of streetlights and traffic signals. And so that process unfolded, and we kind of landed on an alternative that was not at all what we originally envisioned, but which was, you know, that raised cycle track option. But it opened up a lot of conversations for us internally, because instead of just looking at this as a cycling project, we realized that it's actually a roads improvement project. So through that lens, now we were looking at, okay, what are the street lighting needs for this road? What are the intersection issues on this road? What kind of other safety issues can we address while we're trying to achieve our, quote, primary objective, unquote, of achieving cycling on this corridor? So I think we're still working through it. We have our preferred alternative now. We're going to run through detailed design, but we've kind of, this project has been, like I say, a learning experience, not just for my group, but I think for groups across the city, you know, staff groups and other sections, that there are no straightforward projects, and there never should have been, probably, to begin with. And we need to be integrating all of our different needs as much as possible. So I think for the city corporately, it's been a great experience, long and painful at times, but a great experience. And I think something we'll be able to point back to in the future and say, well, we learned a bunch on this one, so let's not do that again going forward, and let's really tighten up our processes as we move forward.
That's great. There's so much to unpack in that. One of my favorite expressions. But I'll just say, for everybody, for the job seekers, the language around evaluation of alternatives and preferred alternative is very common transportation language. And you can say that you know that in school, but until you do it every single day in your job, about the options that are on the table, how you evaluate them, what are the trade-offs, and then how do you get to preferred alternative? And what that looks like is such a huge part of a lot of our jobs. So there's a lot in there. That was really great. So I'm going to go now to Anita. So Anita graduated with an undergraduate degree in civil from the University of New Brunswick. So my alma mater. So I have a soft spot for you, Anita. I can't help it. When we met on LinkedIn, I saw UNB and wanted to talk to you. So Anita took transportation planning with Professor Hansen, which is also funny as he was my classmate, and now he's a professor in transportation, another great resource in Canada. His latest work was in rural transportation, and he's just someone that really helps people connect to. So that's a sort of great thing coming from UNB. So Anita's looking for an entry-level civil engineering job, and I'll pass it to you to share the rest of your 2-minute story.
Thank you so much, Kate. So I'm just going to be talking about a project I did when I was in final year. It was a parking lot structure. We had to design one, I and some other people in a group. It was like we had to consider those key stakeholders, so the people that this project would affect more. So that was the students and also the general public as well. The contractors were also stakeholders in the design to know who would be affected, like positively or negatively, by this design. We had to do some sort of survey with the students. So we had a bunch of questions, handed it out to the students to know how they would feel about the parking lot structure. We also had to look at the risks associated with this design. So we had to look at the soil stability. The design was to be built on a demolished structure. So the soil there was not really stable. To mitigate this risk, we had to do a slope stability analysis. We had to look into putting a temporary retaining structure. Another risk was the pedestrians or traffic flow. So we had to, develop a traffic plan or a traffic diversion for incoming and outgoing pedestrians and vehicles. And then another risk we looked at was the schedule. We had to take into consideration the weather. We also had to look into public holidays when no work would be done. We had to look at the downtime during construction, and we had to make sure the structure was ready before the fall term in the university. So it was, in general, the project was, applying our transportation knowledge, because not only our transportation knowledge as well as our project management knowledge. So not only did we have to do, the design of the parking structure in AutoCAD or SketchUp, but we had to do things like scheduling. We had to do a full cost estimate of the design. So yeah, that was the entirety of the project. It was a successful one. At the end, we came up with a parking lot structure that had 355 parking spaces, and then 6 spaces for accessibility. And then because we wanted a greener look to the design, so it had a large street presence. So we didn't want people to just look at a large paved area. So we put out, trees around the exterior structure of the parking lot, and also like a large flower bed advertising UNB on the parking lot as well. So yeah, that's it about the project. And I've also been involved in projects while in the past, I worked as an intern in an engineering company back home. It was a highway construction project. So I was involved in like field survey and field tests and, site inspections. So currently, yeah, like he said, I'm just out there actively searching for a transportation or civil engineering job and anywhere in Canada.
Wonderful. And Anita, honestly, you did a good job of taking a school project and relating it to what a job would be like in the field. So that, very good. All those elements, right, of flow and the user and design and risks, right? So that was a really good sort of summary. Thank you. So Florence, you're next. Florence is a transportation engineer at Harborside, transportation consultants in Halifax, also a graduate of UNB. I met Florence at UNB a number of years ago when, Florence, you were finishing your grad school there in the transportation group. And then I've been lucky enough to get to know you over the years. One thing we joked about once is all the synchro that you do, but I know that your life is way more than that, more than synchro modeling, but that's a huge part of a typical job too. So I'll pass it to you to tell us maybe a bit of synchro or not. Skip the subject entirely. It's up to you. So I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a transportation engineer with Harborside. I've been here for almost 5 years now, straight out of my master's. I'd like to kind of point out, it's interesting enough because I actually got my job at Harborside through a CITE networking event. The Atlantic section always has an event in the fall at UNB, and that's how I met my current boss. And so it's kind of important to do these things. So I'm glad I can be a part of this. So yeah, I've been working for about almost 5 years now. My experience is all in the private sector. Like Kate said, I do a lot of synchro. I do a lot of traffic analysis, anything from transportation planning to just regular traffic impact studies. I also do some micro simulation, do some BIM work. Actually, recently I've worked on a project where I modeled the whole site for a hospital. So they were looking to improve traffic flow and pedestrian flow through their sites as they were expanding buildings, building a new parking garage. So it's a pretty interesting project to be able to model different vehicles as well as pedestrians and kind of the interactions. because we always talk about multimodal approaches and, trade-offs between pedestrians and vehicles. So microsimulation is a nice way to kind of quantify the different modes. Yeah, and other than that, I do actually a lot of policy development projects, developing guidelines for smaller municipalities. So recently I've been working on a traffic calming policy. We've done a number of those through the years, but this one's kind of a little bit more interesting, where we've done one for another municipality in the past, and then we actually got to manage the traffic calming process. So this request would come into us, we'd evaluate them, we'd follow the process that we designed for them. So through that, when you develop these policies, you're always developing it for a client, that the client's then going to implement it and run it, right? So this one, we have a kind of a different approach where we got the chance to do it, evaluate all the different requests, and some of them we followed all the way through design and implementation. So now this new one that we're doing, we get to kind of implement some of our lessons learned throughout this process, which was, interestingly enough, one of the biggest challenges was public support. We had that as one of our steps in our process, and we found that it's really difficult oftentimes to get residential support. Most people just don't respond. So this time we're kind of modifying the process to see how we can get, rather than getting a certain percentage support for council to be able to move forward with the process, we're looking at getting more, a range of whether, instead of saying yes or no, it's more of a survey that asks them whether they're comfortable with a certain plan that we give them. So it's always nice to get to see the other side, the municipal side of the project. And yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Oh, it's so very relevant, right? And even in the first taping, we talked about traffic calming, and then who gets to decide, right? The person with it's on the street or the one passing through, and then how that fits with the city's policy. So that's really great. And that side of how a private sector person could work so closely with the municipality. You're essentially telling a story that you're their staff almost when you're the one reviewing their traffic calming. So that was a really good story. Go ahead.
Yeah, you don't always get to, you give someone a procedure, steps to follow, and then to actually have to follow them yourself and then see how they actually apply in a real world situation. It's interesting, and it gives you a different approach. And then, you don't always get to have lessons learned for the next time you develop a similar process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great example. So our last speaker, our final speaker, Sai Shoben, he refers to himself as an upcoming transportation engineer on LinkedIn. I like that term. It's about 2 years of design experience in structures and a year of project management experience. You recently graduated, right, with a master in transportation engineering from the University of Alberta, and had an internship too as a cost and analysis engineer there in Edmonton. So you're looking for work, but I'll let you talk, Sai Shoben, for yourself, but in traffic safety, signaling, highway, pavement design, transportation engineering. So I'll pass it to you for your 2 minutes.
Hey, thanks, Kate. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I just want to talk about one of my projects in the final year, which is snow plowing, optimizing snow plowing route using ArcGIS. So we use ArcGIS software to optimize the snow plowing routes, and we use network analysis is one of the tools which are available in ArcGIS package. And if you know that network analysis, which solves the problem based on like how Google solves, like if it goes from point A to point B, which gives the shortest distance and time. But for our problem, it needs to cover each and every lane and roads in the city. So this was one of the constraints we follow, and each and every municipalities have their own level of roads, like primary, secondary, tertiary roads. And there's a second constraint, which ArcGIS doesn't solve like this. And third thing is to solve like the main problem. So first goal is to make sure that we can develop a way to solve this problem in ArcGIS. So I just came up with a method. So it just make the software to solve all these things, like all the vehicle can go in each and every passage as possible, and it goes like in primary, secondary, and tertiary level road system as possible. This was my first goal in the software, which was very difficult, but finally after like 8 months of research, I was able to find it. I just went to each and every methods like so each and every terms in ArcGIS to find out a method where I can manipulate the software to make sure that it works in the way we want it to work. And the second goal is to reduce the cost. That's the main goal of this project, to reduce the cost of the snow plowing route in a city. So we had like 3 methods. One is reducing the number of fleets, and 2, each city, municipalities and counties have their own boundaries within themselves for snow plowing operations. So we want to break those boundaries and see like how the vehicle reacts, what's the time, what's the cost. And the third is reducing the number of dead miles. So these were 3 goals we able to solve it. And when we merge the boundaries of like nearby counties, we are able to reduce the cost by 15 to 17%. Still, it's a study in progress. I guess I may just follow up with my professor for writing a paper on it in the future. Still, we are discussing about it because it's a very huge project. It takes a lot of time. And there was one more interesting project I need to talk is my course project, which is traffic safety analysis. We are given a data for a busy intersection where there are many accidents taking place within the city. I think it's near the downtown area. And we are given like last 5 years of data. We did all the analysis, like what's the cause of crashes, what type of crashes. We did like a lot of analysis, and we came up with few parameters like these are the reasons why the crashes are happening. And we use a CMF warehouse to find the mitigation for each and every crashes, like what can we do, what are the steps we can do to improve the intersections. And we have to do the cost benefit analysis for each and every crashes, what way it improves the intersection in the better way. And we came up with 3 solutions to improve the intersections. And it was like for the Vision Zero project for City of Edmonton. It was really interesting one. And I'm just looking for opportunity as a transportation planner or traffic safety analysis or in traffic operation throughout Canada. Thanks.
Wonderful. And I mean, winter city planning affects so many of us in so many different ways, right? So, and then also the use of GIS, right, for finding solutions, but it also comes back to policy, right? It's policy and budgets and lots of other elements there. So we're going to shift to the just discussion amongst us. One thing though is we'll just keep, if you have 5 ideas in your answer, let's try 1 each so that we share the time to get this conversation going, because that's the best part, right? Is when we can get talking amongst ourselves. So I think like that idea of a project and maybe shifting from what your original plan was, and the idea of maybe schedule shift or goals objective shift, because that's a huge part of our job too, right? We started out with great intentions, either a long range plan there, Carrie, to a bikeway design, Matthew, to traffic calming. So let's talk, so using examples from our jobs, because it's also explaining typical jobs. Let's talk a little bit about sort of defining a project and then what happens to it over time. I know that's a broad one, but I think we can do it. So Carrie, can you give an example, some like from in your technical skill in your teams, just thinking about how jobs change over time?
Yeah, so in my current role, we do a lot of TIAs. That's the bread and butter of what we do. And certainly when we're approached to provide a proposal for the work, we're just looking at efficiently identifying what tasks are likely to be required and what steps are going to need to be done, put a level of effort to it so our developer client can consider our proposal, perhaps compare to others, and then move forward. Those are pretty quick. We don't spend a lot of time on them. So we have in Metro Vancouver, there are 23 individual jurisdictions, and they all have their own standards and guidelines. So when we're successful with jobs, which we are on more than 50% of the ones we quote for, then we have to start digging into, okay, what specifically are we going to do here? what do we know about this client and what are they going to need in terms of help and support. They tend to have different levels of expertise in the process and in what we do as traffic consultants. So what level of support are they going to need, and put together a plan really to give that to them. And then there's a lot of interaction along the way where we keep making minor shifts in direction so that we can cost effectively for our developer clients and in a way that is professional and satisfies the interests of the approval authority, deliver a product that is useful for them. So although it's tempting to approach our work from a template perspective, in the end, we never do that. We're always course correcting along the way, trying to be efficient, not go down the wrong path, and deliver something that's of value to everyone.
Yeah, and there's so much in there, different jurisdictions, right? Could be changing their mandates and their influences, priority shifting, and then just those curveballs. So Matt, can you talk about a curveball or talk about a little bit about scoping out a job and sort of that element?
Yeah, sure. I mean, scoping out a job it's a challenge, and I think you do your best with the information that you have at the time to try to scope something out, but you always have to have that plan B in mind. So another example that I can think of from my work in Mississauga is, again, it's cycling infrastructure focused, a trail project along a roadway, which for a variety of reasons had to be canceled. And so we had to pivot really quickly and find a replacement, because this project was being funded by senior level government through a grant program. So we didn't want to lose that funding. So we had to pivot very quickly. And so the challenge there was to quickly identify another project of very similar scope, but in some ways less complex, because we had less time to execute from like literally startup to design to construction. And so having awareness of what some of the deal breakers could be when you're looking for scope, say like, well, we could select this location, but you just drive down the road and you see that there's conflicts, whether it's utilities, trees, property constraints, like being able to quickly flag those sorts of issues right away so that you can make quick decisions. And again, it's not to say that some of those complex locations can't be or shouldn't be done at some point in time, but it's knowing the environment that you're in and knowing the situation you're in to be able to make that selection. So in our case, we were fortunate to quite literally go around the corner to one of the intersecting streets and do a project there, which over time now has led to more infrastructure along that street for a pretty significant stretch of the city. So we took what came to us and have tried to leverage that as we move forward.
So for the job seekers, what I'm trying to do with my question is get stories of what typical jobs are like, but also hints at what skills are needed in successful staff, what people are looking for. So there's the obvious list, like multitasking. There's no way any of us do only one thing every day, right? So the multitasking, project management, but also communication, because it could be communicating something difficult to somebody, that a path is changing, like an approach is changing. And then more specifically to different types of jobs, just having an understanding of how a modeling work might affect the steps of a project. So the example would be, if you don't have the data, but your due date is nearby, that job is not moving fast, right? For those TIAs, if you don't have the data, right? That's the most basic. But you think of design, right? Like if you don't have the survey and the utilities, that job is not moving very fast either to build something. So you're just sort of being able to think about those things that affect a job moving forward. So Florence, do you have a story you want to share there? And then I'll open it up, right? So if anyone wants to ask a question, but Florence, do you want to add?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Carrie that some projects, just cookie cutter kind of traffic impact studies, you know, it's pretty easy to determine a scope and run with that scope. Larger scale projects, oftentimes you'll have an RFP with a really detailed scope, so it's easy to kind of figure out how your project will go from there. Then you also get in a situation where, you know, if it's a really large project and it goes over a number of years, you can get that kind of scope creep, or like easily, sometimes it's something as simple as the project, one of the reviewing agencies that need to approve it, the project changes hands, and then you have a different person in charge. And it's always balancing that the needs of your client, keeping them happy, and then also kind of the original scope of your project.
Yeah, it's a constant juggling match, that's for sure. And I mean, it happens both in private and public. It can be in different ways, because sometimes in private it could be there's not enough work at the time, or too much work. And for public, it might be, Matt, you can correct me, but it might be changing priorities of upper management, right? Or a councillor changing a city. So being able to be, so back to skills for you, someone that's a writer and something else, you know, have a few of the skills is very positive too, so that you can shift, right? Like if a job isn't happening, that someone can be able to do a bunch of different skills is also something that I have to look for in a smaller firm, is communication skills, writing skills, and something else, some technical. It's really the game. So I again open it up for questions, but I can also try and tie in the other themes. So the career tip is around licenses, certifications, just that sort of process, whether it is PNG or professional planning, but also transportation. What is it? TSB has road safety professional level 1. I get it, it's a cost to it, but that is something out there that is offered that could be an option for somebody if it was something that could be paid for and handled in other things you're juggling. It is something about road safety, so sort of that world of certifications. So if you have a question, ask away, just related to sort of licenses and certifications. Anita, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, so I looked into I just wanted to know, are there like other certifications that someone maybe that hasn't worked a lot? Like I've had some internship experience, but not like full-time engineering work, because I looked into the road safety professional exam, the one you talked about. I wanted to take it. I gave them a call there, but they said, oh, you would need to have experience in the transportation field before you can actually take the exam for at least a couple of years.
Okay, so I mean, in fairness, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, it might be maybe not out of undergrad be appropriate, but it's one of the options. Carrie, you've unmuted, so I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so I actually have the road safety professional level 1 certification, as well as the professional traffic operations engineer certifications from the Transportation Professional Certification Board. And they do follow on. First of all, you need a professional engineering license in the jurisdiction you're working on, and then you need additional experience. So they're not immediately accessible. But one thing to think about if you're looking toward those certifications and the value of them is both doing projects, volunteering, putting up your hand for projects, and then as you work through projects, think of how when you're filling out the PNG application and then the subsequent applications, how you'll describe the projects you've worked on and the responsibility you've taken. And of course, landing the first job is a key to it. But like Anita did when you talked about your school project, really tying in how you handled the school project with how you'd fulfill those responsibilities in a professional role, and thinking about it both when you're doing the job, recording it as you're going through the process, so you've got it to access later. That all sets you up for success at that later stage. So not exactly the question that was asked, but definitely something that you can do to set yourself up for subsequent success when you do have those years of experience.
And I'll bring it back maybe more applicable to you, Anita, and others, is sometimes having eligible for your PN license, if that's your situation, is a good sentence. If you're not quite there yet, right, to communicate an intention, so that would help you out. And I'm careful too, right? This isn't meant to be go get more schooling or go get more licenses or you have to, but it is an important topic because I get asked about it a lot. So either it is EIT eligibility or CET, and then because we're on CITE's website or video here, that's an obvious one too, of a place for a membership. So it's not a license, but it still is an association. Matthew, you unmuted. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just on the point about indicating your eligibility or potential eligibility for a certification down the road, because I think as an employer and somebody who's been doing some recruitment lately, that is often an unanswered question. So we may or may not see on a resume that a candidate indicates membership in IT, so like an associate member or whatever the different categories are. But unless they have the certification, then that's fairly clear. But for those that don't, if it's articulated that you have a path towards that certification, that actually can go a long way. You know, for us in Mississauga, I think there's a reasonably strong emphasis on having certifications, and that's usually part of our job requirements when we post. That's a blanket statement. I can't speak for everybody, but certainly in my experience. But that's not to say that for the ideal candidate, we wouldn't work around that, particularly if candidacy for a certification in a reasonable time frame is an option for that person. And you know, then we take the longer view and say, well, if the person can work towards their certification and then meet the requirements, now they're growing professionally with us. And ultimately, it's still an asset to the corporation to have good people. So the certification can be an asset, but don't necessarily assume that it's going to be a block. So yeah, indicating that you're eligible for these things and then having a sense of what the roadmap is to get to that certification, I think would definitely be an asset to include.
That's really helpful. And remember also, Matthew speaking from public sector, which might have different requirements in their postings that are mandatory, or as he says, flexible, which might be different in the private sector, depending. But yeah, there's a lot of good information in there. So thank you for that. Does anyone want to ask a question, or we can keep talking and sharing ideas for you? It's a frustrating topic. We're allowed to admit that, right? There's a lot of job postings for junior engineer, 5 years experience, PN, and I'm going, that is a hot commodity. That is not a junior, and that is, a lot of people would love a 5-year PN to hire. It's a barrier. We have to admit that, because getting the experience helps you get the license. So anything else you want to, I see Moheb, you've unmuted. So do you want to talk?
Yes, I have a question about the PNG application to any of the professionals who want to answer. So basically, I was eligible for the EIT, and I actually got the EIT certification. And I recently passed my NPP exam. So I passed the PPE exam. The third step toward getting a PNG license is I should have at least 1 year experience in Canada. As an internationally trained individual that I have actually experience abroad, and my education is from the US. So what are some of the tips that you can give me to facilitate in my job hunting so I can actually land a job in Canada and get that 1 year of experience and finally get a PNG? Because I tried a lot. It's almost around 1.5 years, but it's really difficult to actually land a job in Canada. not having actually a Canadian experience and having an international experience. Thank you so much.
You want to try first?
Yeah, so what comes to mind is some proxies for that 1 year of experience. I know CITE has a number of committees. I served for a while on the technical liaison committee. And so technical projects are managed through that group. TAC has some committees that you can volunteer for. And I think right now a lot of the work is being done virtually because of travel restrictions. So that eliminates the need for a travel budget for those committees. But that I would try that if there's a committee that interests you, and do the work of that committee to accumulate some experience. May or may not be considered by PEO, which I think you're trying to get licensed with. But it helps, right? It all accumulates and it all contributes. There may be some other associations will have similar volunteer opportunities that can help get you in the door, get content on your resume.
I also, Mohab, I wouldn't be shy about saying I only need 1 more year till my PN, like early in your cover letter. Like, so EIT next to your name, and put that early on. That will also help someone understand, because ideally we get you in a job, right, for that experience. So I would also think that. And I know you and I spoke about overqualified, underqualified, which is also a problem, which is fair, being told both. But part of that is CITE is part of the answer. TAC is part of the answer, and really messaging how your University of Missouri work, right, is applicable in Canada. So, this is why we're doing this, is to try and to close that 1.5 year gap. Anita, you and I spoke once and you asked me a question about geography. Can you ask that to everybody else? Just unmute. There you go.
Oh, yes. So I just wanted to know, like Carrie or Matthew or Florence, even you, Kate, if any one of you have been part of like the hiring process, what are the tips that you could give to people? So for example, I reside in New Brunswick, but then in my resume, I stated that I'm willing and able to relocate like on my own without help from the employers. But it seems like employers sort of shy away when they see that your location, you're not in the same place as they are. So what are the tips, or what can I include in my resume that can help with that?
Go for it, Carrie. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, because I've definitely done some relocating. I've worked in Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia. Some of the things that are helpful. First of all, one of the issues for the employers may be that they know that it takes time to relocate, and they may be looking for someone in the shorter term. So that already gives the local candidates a little more edge. When you're stating that you're willing to relocate, I would stop what you're stating there. I wouldn't say at my own cost, because that's a negotiation that you'll have later in the process anyway. I think it's great to say you're willing. And if it comes down to the negotiation and they either ask the question or they don't offer relocation expenses, if you've got that flexibility, it could help you. But don't put that out there up front. So the things that are different, obviously, province to province, are the legislation, the act, and the specific requirements for licensing. So if it helps if you have some specific targets, like if you are focused more on, you're in New Brunswick, right? Yeah, New Brunswick or Ontario or elsewhere in the Maritimes, for example, knowing a little bit about the legislation and then how transferable your EIT is, for example, from province to province, what you'd need to get licensed in that province. And just being able to demonstrate that you've researched the requirements for the specific province. And this is the anticipated time frame. Those kinds of things could be helpful, but it does require, every province you're looking into has something unique, province and territory. So you do have to do a bit of homework there. So helpful or not, I'm not sure, but
I agree. Carrie, I agree with you. You don't have to say, Anita, that you're willing to pay. I know why you're doing that, though. You're trying to stress the sentence and that you mean it, I guess, is what you're trying to do with that kind of language. But the communicating clearly, willing to locate. One tip I often give is also think about how your address appears, and that might not be applicable in your case, Anita, but on a resume, either your email tag, or even if you are actually applying to your own city, making it clear that you live there. It actually is a quick thing. Knowing that someone is in where they are in Canada is just a quick, can be a quick screen in a positive way, right? University of New Brunswick grad is a good sentence really early, right? Like it's a respected engineering school in Canada. So there are ways of sort of helping that geography to help you out. It's a tough question though, and in these times, maybe companies will be changing a bit about how they hire too, right? Also, some companies are coast to coast, others are more regional, so I can see that impact too. Does anyone else want to ask sort of a certification / license / geography question? Sai Shoben, do you have a question for the group?
Yeah, actually I'm eligible for EIT, but due to the current thing, because my undergrad is from a foreign university, I need to go through this and they have to give approval. So because of current situation, my college can't able to send my transcript to the WES. So how much weightage that EIT has now in my job search? Because it's been like, it's going to take like 4 to 5 months, I guess, to get my EIT.
Okay.
So how much is going to affect me?
You could write applied for EIT. So maybe not eligible for, because you don't know yet. You can also write applied for it. It's at least moving in the direction. I mean, it's the delay is sad and hard, but it's still something for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Matthew, you have anything you want to add?
I was thinking about the AIT certification specifically, and you know, the city. So my division at the city has an EIT program, so where we hire 3 or 4 EIT candidates who then rotate around the division into different sections over a 3-year period. At which point, at the end, if I've got my math right in my head, but I'm not an expert on this, that should get them pretty close to or eligible for the PEng. And then ultimately, one of the purposes of that program is that ideally that those candidates then end up staying with the city. So, and I'm under the impression that a lot of other private firms also hire specific EIT positions. So I guess this is me asking a question then. To what extent are the job seekers looking for EIT positions, or is that, or am I in my head, am I overestimating how often those sorts of positions are available in the market?
So while someone decides if they want to jump in with an answer to one of the job seekers, I'll just say thank you for that. A lot of cities do have specific EIT rotation systems. I know Mississauga's was posted on LinkedIn by some staff recently, or in the recent past, and I believe other cities, maybe Hamilton also has it too. So yeah, that is another source to sort of move through a program. City of Toronto has the fellowship for planning too, so where you move through different departments, getting different experience, and there's a lot of good experience gained that way. Florence, you've unmuted. Do you want to share something?
Yeah, so just talking about EITs in the private industry, I know I was hired as an EIT, and some firms actually, they told me at my firm that they kind of like in some ways having an EIT, because then you can mold that person to kind of what you need in your company in some ways. So I know we actually have a pretty young office age in our office. There's a lot of EITs. So especially if you have a master's, it also helps that you don't sound so green. But some private firms do like EITs so that they can mold them and teach them kind of their way of things.
And for everybody, Harborside, right, is in Halifax and has an Ontario office too.
And PI and St. John's.
There you go. So, that's an example of some regional focus, but also some other offices. Well, I hope we're helpful here today. I thank everyone. This has been definitely coast to coast with a theme of geography. So yeah, use these episodes, use LinkedIn and these connections, please, and let's try and help make some connections for you. So thank you, everybody.